The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the virtual hands-on lab session for September, fall edition. We're going to begin in just a couple moments. We'll let everybody actually file in and get settled. But for everybody that was here on the dot, I'm actually going to share this slide so that just to get started, you still have time to sign up for a Sigma free trial. We are so cloud prepared and ready to deploy that even if you just got in now and you want to follow along live with this session, just go to www.sigmacomputing.com/free trial and you'll be able to sign up in just a matter of maybe 3 minutes to get up and running and ready to follow along. And keep this slide up for just a couple more moments, and then I'll talk everybody through it once I see the attendees number level off here. So I see folks are still joining. It's a good chance also to familiarize yourself with the GoToWebinar control panel. We'll be able to field questions in the questions tab, and there's also a handout in the handout tab, which is our hands-on lab guide. So if you select that and open it up, that's what you can use to follow along with Ryan as he walks through this hands-on lab. And that's also nice to have if you ever want to do it self-paced after the fact. And I'm going to say this a few more times, but we are recording this session. So after it wraps up, you'll receive an email in your inbox, and that's also a nice way to follow along at your own pace. All right, I think we're reaching maximum capacity here, so let's get things going. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Zack Norton. I'm a technical product marketing manager at Sigma. I'm joined by Ryan Mattel. He's one of our preeminent solution engineers, and we also have Michael Maltese, another Sigma solution engineer, that will be able to answer questions in the GoToWebinar chat. So there's a little chat tab to post questions. First questions are usually just how to get started, get set up. So let me bring that up real quick. There are two components. There is the Sigma free trial account, and then there's the hands-on lab guides. The lab guide is available in the handout tab, and the Sigma free trial is up on sigmacomputing.com/free trial. I'm going to be going through a few different slides, introduce you folks to Sigma if you're not already familiar, but feel free to take the time now to sign up, get ready, you still have time to follow along. Now, I'm going to launch a poll real quick just to get an idea for our audience. And what I'd like to know is already, what is your familiarity with Sigma? You'll see that poll launch in just a second. Okay, let the votes come in. I think this gives me a pretty good sample size. I'll share the results. We have some folks that are completely new. Some people have seen a demo, probably seen our first pitch deck, but I'll do a quick introduction before we go into the hands-on lab. But glad to see so many Sigma customers are here that just want to train up, learn a little bit more of kind of like a Sigma 102 lesson for some of the analysis possible. So there are the results. And I'm going to go back to my slides here in just a second. All right. So again, the handout is available in the GoToWebinar. You can ask us questions, and you can access the free trial at sigmacomputing.com/free trial. And this session is going to be recorded, so you'll get that right afterwards, and you can follow along self-paced if you just want to watch Ryan walk through the presentation and then circle back afterwards and do the click through at your own comfortable pace. Now, for a quick introduction to Sigma, for the folks that are completely net new, and even for our customers, I like to remind folks where we came from and what we are. which is a next-gen cloud analytics tool for the modern data stack. Cloud analytics, so we have no previous on-prem baggage. We were never a desktop tool. Nothing has to get installed. No virtual machines have to get spun up. We are completely modern for connecting to tools like Snowflake, like BigQuery, Databricks, as well as Redshift. So what we differentiate with is our spreadsheet-like capability. So for folks that are kind of net new to analytics, they can just take what they already know from Excel and apply it within Sigma. And for smaller customers, we can sometimes be the one BI tool. For larger customers, we're often complementary to existing traditional business intelligence. So if you like your existing enterprise reports, you could keep them. But then we also provide Sigma for a lot more ad hoc discovery on tools like Snowflake. And I always like to remind people that we're brought to you by the same people that brought you Snowflake. Mike Spicer, the original CEO of Snowflake, he wanted to figure out his next bet. So why not analytics? And why not have a larger total addressable market than just Snowflakes? That's why we connect to the other cloud data warehouses as well. So after revolutionizing the cloud data warehouse, now let's do that for analytics and expand access to more business type users that want to answer their own questions on top of that scalability and elasticity of the cloud data warehouse. And the way they do that is with a Sigma workbook. That's what Ryan's going to walk you through all the ins and outs of during this hands-on lab, that you make the live connection. Sigma doesn't move any of the data out of the cloud data warehouse. So what we want to emphasize is that security and governance of the cloud data warehouse, and then allow the creation of traditional dashboards or visualizations, but really the spreadsheet experience for being able to add ad hoc pivot tables and formulas and calculations on the fly, as well as being able to drill any which way into the data without having to have it pre-rigged up for you in the more traditional BI paradigm. So within our workbooks, we explore and collaborate in real time. Neat little features like creating a data story, add text, add dynamic text, one of my favorite neat little features, as well as scaling with your cloud data. So behind the scenes of this workbook can be millions or billions of rows of data. And a lot of our customers like to embed that. So put it into Salesforce or put it into a web portal for their clients to be able to drill into the data. And speaking of our customers, 400 plus, like I said, for smaller companies, we can be the one BI tool, but for larger companies, we oftentimes take a more complementary approach. I have another poll before we get into the actual trial, which we always like to know for folks. You'll see this launch in just a second. Are you more familiar with BI tools or spreadsheets? This is a nice thing for Ryan to be familiar with as he walks through the hands-on lab. And I'm gonna close that. We got most folks voted. I think you can see the results here. That, yep, as per usual, a nice spread there between more traditional BI tools and spreadsheets. So again, what we like to do is transpose that tribal knowledge that you have from working within an Excel sheet or Google Sheets, and then really use that to leverage it into more of a traditional BI paradigm for building out visualizations, all within these Sigma workbooks. Now, I'm going to hide those results and we'll get into the lab. So I'm going to hand it off to Ryan. One last reminder, this will be recorded. You'll get the recording afterwards. The handout is available within the handout tab. And if you have any questions, enter them into the questions tab, and Ryan or Mike will be able to answer any of the questions that come up. Get real creative. There are a lot of tenure on this call, so we can really drill into some of the different granular questions that you have. So let me stop sharing and I will hand off control to Ryan. All right,
Hello.
the floor is yours, Ryan.
Thank you very much, Zach. Nice to meet everyone. My name is Ryan Mattel. I'm a solution engineer here at Sigma. I've been here for 4 years now, so I'm excited to show you what the product has become and how you can use it to run BI in your organization. So two ways you could go about doing this. There should be an attached handout for the hands-on lab. It is a PDF, so one way you could go about doing this is just following along, watching me work through this PDF, kind of look at this more as a demo. The other way would be to follow along on your PDF in your own Sigma organization. All of the data we're going to be working with is on the Sigma sample database, so everyone should have access to that in the left-hand side of your screen right here, and that's where we'll get started. If you are following along, scroll all the way down to Module 3, Introduction to Sigma Workbooks. This is where we'll get started. So I'll give a couple of seconds here for everyone to get prepared. We are starting on Module 3, Introduction to Workbooks. Perfect. So we'll start on 3.1, Explore and Create a Sigma Workbook. So we'll start by selecting on the Sigma sample database that I talked about previously, and that will take us to this Sigma connection. As you see, we are a live window into Snowflake, so you're able to see all of your databases, your schemas, and tables within the Snowflake connection. We'll go ahead and drop down into this Plugs Electronics schema, and then we'll select on this Plugs Electronics hands-on lab data. As you see here, it will give us a little preview of this data. As you see at the bottom of your screen right here, we're working on 4.5 million rows of data, which isn't a crazy amount for cloud data scale, but it is a lot more than you would be able to analyze within Excel or Google Sheets. So now we're on step 3.1.3. We'll head to the top of our screen and press Explore. We often find ourselves doing ad hoc analysis, answering quick questions that we just want to find the answer to and then move on to the next thing. That will all be done within a Sigma workbook right here. So once you press Explore, that will take us into an exploration. This is a collaborative canvas where you're able to answer any questions that you may have, or you could build out visualizations and create dashboards for your users to consume. All of that will be done within our workbook here. As you see here, this is our spreadsheet interface. Should feel very familiar to what you're used to in Excel or Google Sheets. Everything that we're going to be doing here will feel familiar to that as well. Any UI actions that we take to make calculations, calculating new columns, or just finding new ad hoc questions and answers that we want to see will all be very familiar to what you're used to in Excel or Google Sheets. So we're on step 3.1.6 if you're following along. We'll start by selecting on this cost column, and we'll check out what is written in the formula bar at the top here. This formula bar is where we will do all of our calculations with familiar Excel syntax. As you see here right now, since we had selected on a column, we're going to see the source table, which this is pulling from, and then the name of the column that we are pulling. So we are looking at our cost column right now. On the left-hand side, you'll see all of the different columns that are stored within this table, along with the different data types that those columns are. You can also see that we have groupings here, which we'll touch on a little bit later in the hands-on lab. So now we're on step 3.1.8, and we'll start by adding a new column. To add a new column, you could select on the drop-down next to cost here, and select add new column, and that will create a new column for us. From here, we can start by adding some different calculations into our formula bar here, or different columns to create a calculation. So our first step that we will take is we'll calculate our cost of goods sold. So to do that, we'll just type out our cost column, and we will multiply that by our quantity column. And as you see, it will highlight the two columns that you're using. You can press enter, and then that will calculate our cost of goods sold. Now, since this is a monetary value, we'll probably want to format it as a currency. So to format it as a currency, you can either type in the $sign or just select on the $sign right here. And then we could rename this column the cost of goods sold. You could rename it one of two ways. You could select on the drop down and then rename the column, or you could double click to rename this column to cost of goods sold or COGS. That was step 3.1.9. We'll now, okay, we're now on step 3.1.10. And I don't know if you saw it, but there was a blue line that ran across the top of our screen here. That is us issuing a live query to Snowflake. So if we went into our query history here, we are able to see the different queries that are sent to Snowflake. And this direct connection is a big differentiator that Sigma has compared to other BI tools. For one of three reasons. The first reason is that we are accessing the live data straight from Snowflake since we are querying it directly. So any data that is in Snowflake is what is going to be returned within Sigma. So the data is always live and accurate. We have unlimited query speed and scale because we leverage the compute layer of Snowflake. So any query that you're sending to Snowflake is going to be running at the speed of your cloud data warehouse instead of calculated within Sigma. This is also great because we are not storing or caching any of the data within Sigma. All of the data stays within your single source of truth, which is your cloud data warehouse. So we're never taking out any of the data, removing it from that safe space, which is Snowflake. Great, so now we're on step 3.1.11 and we'll add a new column here. So to add a new column, once again, we'll select on the dropdown, press on add new column, and then we'll pop up into our formula bar to calculate our revenue. To calculate our revenue, we'll do our price multiplied by our quantity, and that will give us our revenue. And we'll format that as a currency as well. Next, on 3.1.12, we'll add one more column here. So we'll select on add new column one more time. Another way to call out the columns that you want to use in your calculations is just by clicking on these columns. So if we wanted to calculate our profit, we could select on our revenue, subtract that by our cost of goods sold, press enter, and that will now give us our profit. We are now on step 3.1.13, where we'll add one more new column here. And this time we'll want to calculate our profit margin. To do that, we'll call out our profit and divide that by our revenue. And this will give us our profit margin. So since this is not a currency, this is a percentage value that we want to calculate, we could head to the format bar once again and format this as a percentage. Now, I don't know if you saw that it was very quick to run and we didn't see the blue bar running across the top of our screen, noting that we're creating the warehouse. That is because we are calculating this in the browser. So for simple calculations such as multiplication, division, subtraction, Sigma will actually calculate these new columns inside of our browser. This helps extremely with the speed and performance as we are able to see those values almost instantly, as well as it actually does not hit the warehouse. So that means it's going to save you on compute costs as well. On to step 3.1.4, everything we've done here was pretty simple, but if we wanted to get more complex, we can always pull up our function index here. So if you select on the little f of x here, you'll pull up our function index, and from here you're able to see all of the different functions that you're able to use within Sigma. And these are going to be very familiar, if not the same to what you're used to in Google Sheets or Excel. But since you're leveraging the power of SQL, you're able to use things such as window functions, as well as you're able to use pass-through functions, which allow you to call out functions or UDFs from within your warehouse to work with in Sigma. So that will conclude 3.1. We're now headed on to the second part, create visual elements, 3.2. So as we mentioned above, this is a collaborative canvas, so we're able to make these calculations on the fly, as well as create visualizations off this table that we have pulled in. So to create a visualization off this table that we had just pulled in, we'll select on this Create Child Element button, and that will pull up 3 options for us. We're on step 3.2.2 if you're following along. We said we wanted to create a visualization, so we'll select visualization here, and that will make a new visualization element for us to start working on. On the top left side of your screen here, you're able to see all the different visualizations that are natively built within Sigma that you're able to use for your analysis. And we'll go ahead and start with a bar chart. So now let's go ahead and start building our visualization. We'll first want to start by adding a column to our x-axis. To add a column, we'll select on this little plus sign here. And the column we'll want to use is our store region. So you could search the column that you want to use right here. We'll select store region, and that will bring us in for our x-axis. Now let's say we want to see how our profit is doing by our regions. We're on step 3.2.5 now. We'll go ahead and add our profit column to our y-axis. So we can once again search for profit. You select on profit, then as you saw, the query loaded, the little blue line running across the top, that's us issuing the query to Snowflake, and then this is the results that were returned. So now we're able to see our profit by our region. If you ever wanted to look at this values without an aggregate, you could always select on aggregate values, but this will apply a profit for each of those regions, or each of those regions per profit. So we'll just want to look at an aggregated version of this data. So we're now on step 3.2.6, and we'll walk through another way to build a visualization. So if you wanted to build another visualization off this table, another way you could go about doing that is by heading to the top left of your screen and selecting Add Element. From here, we'll want to work with another visualization, and that will give you a number of options for the source for this visualization. You can use one of the table, you can use the table that we brought in with our new calculations here, or you can pull directly from a table, from the table that we started with, or you could select a new table, start with SQL, upload a CSV, one of those options, but we'll go ahead and use the table that we have been working with here. Once again, that will create a new element for us to start working on. And this time we'll go ahead and make a line chart. So here we'll select line chart, and we'll get started on a new visualization. And throughout this time, if I'm going too fast or too slow, feel free to post a little comment in the question section to either tell me to slow down or speed up. But we are now on step 3.2.8, and we'll start with by adding our date column to our x-axis. So another way to add a column to one of your axes is by dragging. So we can select on this date column, drag it up to our x-axis, drop it in there, and then we'll have our date for our x-axis. So on to step 3.2.9. Right now, you see that it is going to truncate our date to day by default. But if we ever wanted to change the level of truncation, we could select on the dropdown for this column, hover over truncate date, and then we're able to see all the options we could truncate this by. We'll go ahead and select month for this example. And as you see here, the formula that we're using for this date column will change to month. So now on to step 3.2.10, and this time we will drag our revenue up to our y-axis. So we'll select on our revenue, drag it up to our y-axis. It will once again default to summing our revenue. So now we're looking at our revenue per month. If we wanted to break this out by a certain category, let's say store region, we can start by dragging our store region up to our color section right here. So if we want to break this out by region, we could drag our store region up to our color, drop that in there, and then that will break out our revenue by our regions here. That was step 3.2.11 if you're following along. So now let's make one more visualization here. So we'll head to the top left side of our screen on step 3.2.12 now. We'll select Add Element, and this time we'll want to create a pivot table. We'll select on Pivot Table here. Once again, we can select on the table that we have been using for all these visualizations, and that will create a new pivot table for us. Now from here, these pivot tables will work the same way that we're using these other visualizations. We'll just use drag and drop to get our columns up to our different sections here. It's important to note that just like these other visualizations, we're going to be running on all 4.5 million rows of this data, and it's going to be running very snappy. You'll no longer have to make cubes or aggregate the data to be able to work on it on Excel. We're just going to be running off all the raw data here. So we'll start by dragging a couple columns to our pivot row section. First, we'll start with store region, drag that up to our pivot rows, and that will populate our pivot row column here. And then let's also drag product type up to our pivot rows. And that will break out our highest level of grouping into our lower level of grouping, which is product type. Now on to step 3.2.14. And let's bring a date up into this. To bring a date, we'll once again drag our date up to our pivot columns. It'll truncate to day by default, but as you see, there's too many values for it to calculate there. So let's go ahead and change this truncation level to year this time. So now we'll be viewing 3 levels of grouping: store region, product type, and date as well. Right now, it looks like we're sorting in ascending order for our date. If we wanted to change the sort level, we could select on our year of date here, select on sort, select on year of date one more time, and that will give us our most current year first. Now let's add some values to this pivot table. To add a value, we'll once again drag our columns up to the value section. Let's first start with profit. We'll drag that up to our values, and that will show us our profit with these 3 levels of groupings. And now let's also add our profit margin as well to our value section. So right now, it's going to default to sum, as I said earlier, but since we're looking at profit margin, we probably don't want to sum up these values. If we wanted to change the level of aggregation that we were looking at, or sorry, change the aggregation value that we were looking at, we can select on our column here for sum of profit margin, head down to set aggregate, and we'll change this to an average of each of our profit margins. And now the data will take the average of the profit margins per these 3 grouping levels. So we're now on step 3.2.18 if you're following along. By default, Sigma will show the totals for each of these grouping levels. If we ever wanted to mess around with them, turn them off, for example, we can select on the column that we want to show totals on, product types, for example, select on that, and that will remove our totals for each of these. But we'll go ahead and keep that on for the time being. So skip to one step there. We are now on step 3.2.20. To collapse this table, maybe we just want to see the values for each of our regions here. We could select on this little minus sign here, and that will collapse our values to show each of our profits and average profit margin per store region. Okay, we are now on step 3.2.21 here, and we'll go ahead and save this exploration that we have been working on. To save this, we'll head to the top right side of our screen and select Save As. As I said earlier, everything we're doing right here is in an exploration, so it hasn't been saved as a workbook yet. If we want to save it as a work to maybe share with other users in our organization, we could select Save As we just did, and then name this plugs, sales exploration. And we'll go ahead and save this in our My Documents. A couple other places to save this. You'd also be able to save this in your workspaces, which is our permissioning layer, where you can share out data with specific teams or specific users if they have access to those workspaces. But we'll save it in our My Documents. Another way to share this out with our users is by selecting on this share button here. So we're on step 3.2.22 if you're following along. You could select share, and then similar to how you would share with Google Sheets or Google Drive, you could type in specific members that you would like to share this with. You could share this with any members in this organization along with teams as well, or you could share this out via a shareable URL. We'll press cancel here for the time being. Lastly, we'll talk about scheduled exports. So we're on step 3.2.23. If you wanted to share out this report on a specific schedule, you could select on the drop down at the top of your screen here and select on scheduled exports. From here, you can add a schedule, and then you have multiple ways of sharing this out. You can share out this entire report or just specific visualizations as an email or Slack on whatever format you would like. If you're sending out the whole workbook, you could send it out as a PDF or image. If you want to send out just the underlying data, you can also send that out as a CSV or Excel file on whatever schedule you'd like. So right now we're sending every day at 9 a.m. And then we also have conditional sending as well, which is very helpful if you want to set up goals or thresholds, or if you want to set up an alerting system. Basically, you'll be able to select on a column, select a criteria. Maybe we'll do revenue here. This is just an arbitrary value. Select a column, select on your criteria, and add a value in here. Signal will test that condition. If that condition is met, we will send it out. If not, we will not send out that data. But we'll cancel out of that export here. So we're now going to hop into module 4. Module 4, creating a dashboard. I'll pause there to look at these questions to make sure I could answer any questions. Looks like Kathy asked, where is scheduled exports? Scheduled exports will be at the top of your screen, right by this little drop-down menu, right by the name of your workbook. You select on this drop-down menu, and scheduled exports will be right here. Will there be a replay? So we will send out the entire recording of this demo after the hands-on lab has ended. So you'll be able to see things that you might have missed at the beginning. Cool. So now we'll hop into module 4, creating a dashboard. So to create a dashboard, we will stay within the same workbook that we're working with and create a dashboard that will be explorable and be able to be used by our users here. To do that, we'll start on 4.1.1, and we'll start by moving our bar chart over to a new page. So if you select on your bar chart here, to move this to a new page, you could select on the 3 dots to the top right of your bar chart, and you could select Move to New Page. Now what that did is it created a new page where it moved our bar chart to, and from here we can name both of our pages. So since the second page is going to be our dashboard, we can go ahead and rename this by selecting on the drop-down, selecting rename, or double-clicking. We'll name this our sales performance. And we'll rename this first page our data page because this is where our underlying data is. Next, let's go about moving our other visualizations over to our dashboard page. To do that, we'll once again head to the top right of our visualization here, select on these three dots, and move to our sales performance page. We'll do that with our line chart as well as our pivot table. So now all that we have on this first page is just our underlying data. So we're now on step 4.1.4. We'll jump over to our sales performance page. And as we see here, our three visualizations are here. If we wanted to move around these visualizations to get them in an order that we want our users to see, you can drag your elements by clicking on these little 6 dots here and then moving them over to a new location. So as you see here, there's a little blue line that populates to the right of our bar chart. If I drop that right there, it will move our line chart right next to our bar chart. Now let's give some context for our users who are viewing this dashboard. Right now we just have some visualizations. Let's go ahead and add a text box. To add a text box, we'll hop into the top left of our screen on Add Element here. And then we will select on Text to add a UI element. As you'll see here, it now made a text box underneath our line chart here. We're on step 4.1.5 if you're following along. We'll go ahead and drag this up to the top of our screen. As you see, there's a blue line that populates there. We'll drop it there, and then we could add some context to our dashboard here. So we'll make this our title, and we'll call this sales performance. We could change the text style to medium heading, and then we'll type in sales performance. Let's add one more text box here to add a little bit more context. We could add one more element here, add a new text box, and now I'll make one right underneath. Excuse me. And we'll add some more context. We'll say this dashboard is used to explore our regional sales performance. And that will give some more context for our users. So that was step 4.1.7 if you're following along. Lastly, we'll make a date range filter here. So if we want to give our users some freedom to apply filters to these visualizations, we could add a date range filter. To do that, we'll select on Add Element here. We'll drop down to Control Elements and add a date filter. And as you see, that will create a new control for us for our date filter. Let's go ahead and name this our date range for control ID. And for our control label, we'll go ahead and we'll call this selected date range. And that will populate there. Right now, this date range filter will not do anything as it's not applying to any of these visualizations below us. If we wanted to add targets for this date range filter, we could jump into the targets tab here. So we're on step 4.1.10 if you're following along. And we'll start by adding a target. We'll add a target, we'll drop down into our sales performance current page, and we'll select on our bar chart here. From there, Sigma will take a guess at what column you want this filter to filter on. Looks like you got it right. We want to filter on our date column because we are using a date filter. And now let's add 2 more targets here for the other visualizations. So if you're following along, we're on step 4.1.12. We'll add a target for our line chart. Once again, it will take a shot at what column you'd like to filter on. Looks like we got it right. We want to filter on our month of date. And then on our pivot table, we're going to want to filter on year of date. Now users will be able to go in, select on a specific filter. We'll select on our date range filter here, and you have some options to filter down this data. Let's say that we want to look at this data for our next 30 days. We can quick select to next 30 days here, and that'll filter our data. As you see, since there's no future data here, that's going to filter out all the data, so we're going to see no data. So let's go ahead and change this filter to last 1 year. Now it'll show us all of our data that we're looking at for our last year. If you wanted to remove this filter, we could just select on the little X here, and that will bring us back to our original state. So now we're on step 4.1.14. Lastly, we'll probably want to hide this base data, as that is what's feeding into all these visualizations. We probably don't want our users messing around with the data that's feeding into those. So we could select on the drop-down for data, select hide, and that will hide this from view for anyone who is viewing this new dashboard. So this looks great. We want to share this out with all of our users. We want to make sure this is the current version. To make sure this is the current version that everyone sees, we could press publish, and now this will be the current version that anyone who has access to will be able to access. So we're now heading on to 4.2, exploring the dashboard. To start exploring, we'll first drop into explore mode on this dashboard. So at the top right of your screen, you could select on editing. We'll preview this as Explorer, and now we'll be in explore mode on this dashboard. As you see in the bottom left, our data tab has disappeared because we had hid that from our explorers. So we're now on step 4.2.3, and we'll run through a little situation here, a little example of how you can explore this data. So I'll read this out. In this exploration, I'm going to take the role of a merchandising manager. I've been asked by our CEO to create a campaign to revive our loyalty program for our top customers. All I've been told is to pilot in our southern region and target customers purchasing computers. These are the first couple of points that give me direction, but from there, I'm not sure yet. I'm going to get transaction level data that my team can build an effective campaign around. So we've got our specifications that we want to drill down into. We'll hop into 4.2.5 and start drilling down onto our bar chart here. So if we look at our bar chart, we said we wanted to focus on our southern region. If we wanted to see the underlying data that is on this bar chart, we could right click on our southern region, select show underlying data, and that's going to show us all the data that is feeding into this visualization. So now you see an aggregated view of the data. If we wanted to see the row level data that's feeding into each of these store regions, we could select on uncollapse, and that will show us each of the rows that is feeding into this sum of profit calculation, specifically for the East. And as you see here, this is us issuing the query to Snowflake, and we will be returned with our row level data. This is helpful because in many BI tools, you just see an aggregated level view of the data. Here, you're truly able to go beyond the dashboard and see what is feeding into these visualizations. Next, we'll start by drilling down into the data. So we said we wanted to focus on our southern region here. If we want to drill down into our southern region, we're going to be able to right click on our southern region here, select drill down, and then you're able to see multiple different columns that we're going to be able to drill down onto. So from here, we said we wanted to look at computers, so we know that it falls under product family. So we can go ahead and select on product family, and that will quickly change our visualization to match exactly what we wanted to see. So what that did on the back end is it applied a filter on our southern region and then changed our x-axis to match product family. So now we see computers and tablets here. So we said we wanted to focus on that. Let's go ahead and drill down one more time onto computers and tablets. This time, let's drill down onto store name. You can always search for the column that you want to drill down onto. We'll drill down onto store name here, and that will once again change our chart. That applied the filter on computers and tablets, and then changed our x-axis to be our store name. So we're on step 4.2.10 if you're following along. At this point, we said we wanted to focus on our customers. Right now, we're looking at a sum of profit. If we wanted to change this calculation to match our customers, we could do that on the fly in the formula bar. So we could pop up into our formula bar here, and we'll change the calculation to be divided by count distinct of our customer name. And now this will change the calculations, as you see the bars changed as well, to be a new calculation, which is our average customer profit. That was step 4.2.11. We'll do one more drill down here on step 4.2.12. So we'll look at one of our top performing stores, which is this Clark store number 942. We'll drill down one more time onto this store. This time we'll drill down onto customer name. And that will give us a new chart one more time. Lastly, we will sort our chart by our average customer profit. To do that, we could select on one of our bars here, look at sort, and right now it's on customer name. We'll want to change this to average customer profit. We'll select on that, and that will change the sort order for us. So very quickly, we are able to drill down to get the answer that we have wanted to see. We can look at this chart to see that there is a steep drop off at around $41,000. We said we wanted our top customers here, so we could apply a filter here that has a minimum of 41,000, and that will give us the exact answer we had wanted to see. We now have our customers that we believe would fit this loyalty program that we want to start out on, because these are the ones that we're able to see spend the most money. And then if we always wanted to drop down into the underlying data to see how these customers are spending their money and what they're spending their money on, we're able to see the underlying data as well. Really get to the lowest level of data to either further our questions or see what's leading into those aggregates. Okay, that was step 4.2.17 if you're following along. So now we're on step 4.2.18. We'll finish up by publishing the results we have here. And next we'll hop into module 5, which is our Sigma tables. This is more of an advanced topic. So if you're following along, get ready to work in some Sigma tables. I'll quickly pause and look if there's any questions I could answer in the chat. Looks like we're all good here. Okay, let's hop into module 5, Sigma tables. So to hop into Sigma tables, we'll start by going into edit our our workbook here, we'll select on edit, and that will bring us back into edit mode here. And now we'll start on a brand new page here. So we'll select add page, and that will create a new page for us. From here, we'll want to pull in a new table. So we'll select on table here. And then we'll go ahead and select the table that we have been using already. And that will bring in the table with our calculations that we had made on our previous page. So we're on step 5.1.3. We'll start by duplicating our date column. Oh wait, no. We're just going to truncate our date column here to month. To do that, you could select on the date column, select on the drop-down, truncate this date to month. As you see at the top, that will apply the formula that we have seen previously to this column. And next, we'll group this month of date column. So on step 5.1.4, we'll select on the drop-down for our month, group by this column. And now all of this underlying data will be grouped into each of our months here. As you see, that moved the column over to the left-hand side. And if you're looking on the inspector here on the left side, you can see that we're now have a month of date in our group column. Now let's say we want to see how our profit is doing by month. This is step 5.1.6. To do that, we'll add a new column at our first level here. We could select on add calculation, add a new column, and we'll bring in sum of profit. This will give us our monthly profit since we are now grouped by our month of date. So we could rename this profit column to monthly profit. If we wanted to see each of our monthly profits per month, we could collapse this column and we'll be able to see all of the profits that are going into each of our months here. That was step 5.1.7. Next, we'll add a second level of grouping here, this time by store region. So you could find your store region on this left-hand side, and you could drag it up to the grouping section to add a column, add a grouping column. So now we have added our store region as our grouping column. We're now grouping by month of date and store region. And next, we'll add this same calculation that we did for monthly profit, this time for store region. So we could add a new column here, and we'll just do that same calculation we have just done, which is sum of profit. And we'll call this our regional profit. That was step 5.1.10. If we wanted to see all the values that are in our regional profit, we could uncollapse this month of date data, and that will show each of our months and the regions and the regional profits that are feeding into that monthly profit. Next, we'll add one more column here at this bottom level here. So we'll add a new column to regional profit. And then here we'll do a cross-level calculation to get the contribution of our regional profit into our monthly profit. To do that, we'll just divide our regional profit by our monthly profit. And now that will give us our contribution percentage. So we'll format that as a percentage, and then we'll rename this contribution. That was step 5.1.13. Lastly, we'll hop into 5.2, intro to totals. So if we wanted to add totals for each of these columns, we can select on the drop-down for store region, select show totals, and that will show totals for each of for each of these grouping levels. As you see, all of these are 100%, which is what they should be. So now we are in step 5.2.4, and we'll add some conditional formatting. To add conditional formatting, we'll select on the drop-down for regional profit and select on conditional formatting. That will quickly make a rule for us. Right now, the rule is if the value is not null, make it green, but we'll go ahead and use color scale here. So you could select on color scale, and then you're able to see that it will break out these values into different colors based off how they relate to each other. Next, we'll focus more on the summary bar. So we're now on step 5.2.5. If you wanted to add a summary or total for this whole table, you can select on this little caret to pop up our summary bar. You could select on the plus sign to add a new summary, and you could treat this new summary as a column. So if we wanted to see a sum of our total revenue, we can find our revenue column, select on revenue here, and that's going to sum up our revenue for our whole 4.5 million rows of this table. Next, let's do the same thing for cost of goods sold. We could add a new summary, search for cost of goods sold, select on that, and that will add a total for cost of goods sold for this whole table. Lastly, let's create a new summary column that is not just a sum. We could do that by selecting add summary here. This is step 5.2.7 if you're following along. Select on new summary, and from here we will add in an equation we want to see. Let's say we want to see our total profit. Instead of just summing our profit, we could call out the summary bars that we have previously created. We'll call out our sum of revenue, subtract that by our sum of cost of goods sold, and now this will be our total profit. Total profit. Now on to step 5.3, intro to parameters. We're going to start on 5.3.2. We'll start by adding a new page element here. So if we select on the little plus sign at the top of our screen, we'll start by adding a text box as a control element. And that'll create it at the bottom of our table here. We'll make sure that this text box is a parameter here, and we'll also want to make sure that it is a number value, and then we could call this our forecast. Parameters are very helpful if you want to manually input data into this table that we have built here. For this example, we are going to manually input a forecast and see how it affects the data. So let's say we wanted to see what would happen if our revenue was increased by 10%. To do that, we'll first fill in a 1.1 into our forecast. But since this is not hooked up to any of our columns within this table, it won't do anything yet. To make sure that this will change this data, we could hop into our revenue here and change the calculation to be sum of revenue multiplied by our forecast. Once we click enter, we should see this number change. This would be if our revenue was increased by 10%, and then our profit will change because it is affected by our total revenue. Lastly, on step 5.3.8, we can publish everything that we've done here to make sure the changes are saved, and that will conclude our hands-on lab. I'll quickly read through this summary, and then we'll hop into some questions after. This lab was designed to be an introduction in how to use Sigma to explore and analyze your data and turn results into visualizations. Through this lab, we have walked through how a Sigma enabled How Sigma Workbook enables us to quickly explore our data in a self-service manner using calculations, groupings, visualizations, the canvas, and dashboards. Because Sigma is SaaS and pushes all queries to your cloud data warehouse for execution, Sigma can combine its user interface and the unlimited power of the cloud data warehouse to give users the look and feel of a spreadsheet, but with no limit on the amount of data you wish to analyze. Unlock the value of all your data and users. So now we'll hop back into our slides here, and we'll do a little Q&A. So I'll quickly look if there are any questions in the chat. If you have any final questions, feel free to put them in the chat right now. I see there's one question. Is Sigma able to access data outside of Snowflake? That is a great question. So Sigma connects live to multiple different cloud data warehouses, such as Snowflake, Redshift, Google BigQuery, Databricks, and Postgres. Those are the ones that we connect live to. So if you have any data in there, we'll be able to analyze it. We also have the ability to use CSV uploads. So if you have CSV extracts that are coming in from multiple different data sources, you can take those CSV uploads and import them through Sigma, have them stored in your warehouse, but you'll still be able to query it and access this data to analyze it. Great question. Are there any Sigma features that you believe are underused? That is a great question. I don't think there are features that are underused, but we are constantly pushing out new features as we, as our engineering team is the best in the biz. There's things like lookups, which is a newer feature that I haven't seen used as much as other features, but I believe it's very powerful. I'll quickly show you where that is within Sigma. If you were to add a lookup column, you can select on the drop-down menu and select Add Column via Lookup, and this is going to act very similar to the lookups you're used to in Excel or Google Sheets. It's a very quick and easy way to join data together that many new users haven't seen yet because it is such a new feature. Great question. Looks like we are all good on questions here. So I'll quickly hop into this page. This is just some next steps in case you want to continue your Sigma experience. You can continue exploring around on your 14-day free trial. If you have technical questions, always feel free to shoot them to our support team. You can access our support team by clicking on this little question mark here and opening live chat. Our support team is the best in the biz. If you have any questions, you could shoot them a message and they're looking to reply in under 1 minute right now. Or if you want to dive deeper through a use case, you could set up some office hours time to work through that use case with them on a 30-minute call. As I said earlier, this recording will be sent out to you, so feel free to share this with whoever you would like. And then we have a couple different webinars that are coming up as well. On September 29th, you could join us to see how Groundswell increased productivity by over 200% without an additional headcount. October 4th, we are building a data synchronized business with a modern data stack with our VP of Product, Giant. That's a very informative session. And then on October 6th, we have a What's New webinar where you get to see all the new features that are within Sigma that we have pushed out. Lastly, we will end with a poll here. So let me go ahead and share this poll out. This is just a poll to see how we can help out with your next steps within Sigma. So after this hands-on lab, what would be the next best steps for you? You could begin a Sigma trial, continue in the trial, schedule a custom demo for your team, or meet with a solution engineer like me or Michael Maltese on the call today. Perfect. Thank you for participating in that. So that is all we have for you today. On behalf of me, Zach, Michael Maltese, thank you very much for joining us. Feel free, like I said, to reach out via customer support if you need any help. And have a great day. Thank you, everyone.